start with, again, how we saw things with Exondys, right? There was a biomarker. We were unsure how it was measured or how it, how it complemented clinical endpoints, but we knew, you need to increase dystrophin. We also knew that that patients had issues with mobility, right? And so the 6-minute walk test is validated and it exists, and it is the platform for which approvals occur. And so companies are often kind of bullied into choosing an endpoint that's already well understood and well validated within the agency, but really hard to hit the mark on. And it turns out not very important to patients. I never cared how far my kid could walk, but the things that I cared about with Max were that he had less fatigue, right? So however he got there, he wasn't tired doing it, and he could complete a full school day. Also the lack of falls, right? So walking 6 minutes sort of takes into account not falling, right? You can certainly walk further if you don't fall and you don't have to get back up. But, I didn't care how slowly he walked as long as he wasn't falling. And getting up off the floor was another one. But then you talk about, what are we doing for patients in their upper body? And that's long been kind of ignored, is that my guys have been non-ambulatory now. Well, Austin, since he was 10 years old and he's 23. And Max, since he was 17 years old and he's 20. So for the last 3 years, Max hasn't walked. But what he has managed to be able to do is brush his own teeth, wash his own hair and body in the shower, fix his breakfast. So the guys live in an apartment attached to my house. And while they have aides that come in and help out, Max is the meal prepper. He brings in his groceries. Believe it or not, the guys leave it by the door and he pulls his things out and puts them away. And as a 20-year-old with Duchenne, that is phenomenal. Max was in the Exondys study, as you know, and he actually joined the gene therapy study in July. And so he does have some added benefit from that. He washed out of Exondys and joined gene therapy. But all of that to say that most measurements are not taken of the upper body, even though one would guess if it's changing the muscles in the whole body, it would impact the upper and lower body. That has been problem for payers. Right. So I just testified just this morning on a bill that Governor Baker is proposing. And, the issue still stands that Mass Health is not covering products, like Exondys, for non-ambulant patients. Why? Because it was approved for, based on 6-minute walk tests. And so what I think the hope is, while our study, and I'll be honest, it's still hard to study non-ambulant patients, and it's so hard for me to say that. But while the FSHD study is still focused on that narrow criteria of more able-bodied patients, the hope is that by using endpoints like reachable workspace, which you complete seated, will give people a better standard or baseline of understanding abilities, so that it'll be more accessible to more people. If you can understand the benefit of, kind of this, and I keep doing this, but literally the reachable workspace is how well can you move in your space. And to me, that means, kids like Austin, he's not a kid anymore, but when he's using his computer or answering his cell phone or writing for a test, how does that impact his life? They've lived very, very productive and decent lives in wheelchairs, as long as they retain some of that function. I think we're moving in the right direction. I think we're listening to patients. When the study was designed that Austin and Max, that Max and then Austin later entered into, patients were not consulted. Nobody came to us and said, what matters to you? When they created this clinical trial, they just read some textbooks and they read how could walking be measured, right? What should we be doing? In our case, we've had an advisory board full of FSHD caregivers and patients for over 2 years. I started consulting with Fulcrum a few years ago, and it's one of the first things that I did. I said, we need to better understand this disease as it relates to patients and caregivers. And I do believe that input really helped to decide what endpoints we were going to use, because we put protocols in front of patients. And we said, does this matter to you? Is it worth testing? And we heard a resounding yes. One member of our advisory board said to me, she was due to have a grandchild, and she said, I just want to be able to hold my grandson and hold the bottle for him to feed him. And so I think about that a lot.